It is Locked On Jazz for the 22nd of September. The biggest concern I have for the Utah Jazz coming into this season, and Tony Jones is still around to have great fun talking the NBA and the Utah Jazz. It's all coming up on today's edition of Locked On Jazz. Pow.
You are Locked On Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
How are you? I'm David Locke, radio voice of the Utah Jazz, Jazz NBA insider. This is Locked On Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz, giving you insight, expertise, geeky numbers, and hopefully making it way better to be a Jazz fan each and every day. Thank you so much for making the Locked On Jazz your first listen of the day. We are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube at Locked On Jazz. So as we inch toward training camp, opening media day Monday, it sounds like training camp Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday in Las Vegas. They'll come back Friday and Saturday and then head off to San Antonio for game number 1. It's right around the corner of the preseason. And then Dallas for game number 2. So it's all coming close. I built myself a schedule last night on making sure I have every team prepped by opening night. And it's 2 or 3 teams a day here for a little while to get it all done. So it is certainly close and running up on us. Here's my biggest concern as we get close to this season and whether the Jazz can replicate last year's success. And that is the amount of career years people had last year. So Mike Conley last year's effective field goal percentage, 55.2. Best of his career was 54.5 prior in the 16-17 season. At 33 years old, he shot 41.2% from three. That's with the most attempts. I mean, just incredible, right? 41.2% from three on 6.5 attempts a game. Both of those career numbers for Mike. Most attempts and highest percentage. He also actually, to his credit, was a career high rebounding season, all in a free agent year in which he then got himself a new contract. He actually had his highest steal rate since 2013-14 at 1.4 steals a game. So the first question, and we're going to run through this, and there's just so many of these career years. Is this because of a collective energy? Is this because of a Quinn Snyder system? Is this because the game evolved? Is this because the Jazz kind of broke the model on how to play in transition? What is it that allowed for these career years? And is it possible to happen again? Royce O'Neal, effective field goal percentage last year, 58.0, career year, 27 years old. In his 4th full season of the NBA, while remarkably increasing his minutes from 17 to 20 to 29 to 32, he had a career year at 58.0 effective field goal percentage. He averaged 6.8 rebounds, up from 5.5. His assists, steals, and blocks were all the same as they were a year prior. His three-point shooting, kind of on career average, but 0.01 off a career year. Joe Ingles, what a season he had. Blowing numbers out. Effective field goal percentage last year. By the way, effective field goal percentage weighs 3-point shooting and 2-point shooting into one number to try to understand your overall shooting effectiveness. 65.2 for Joe. His 2 previous years were at 57. He vaulted to 65% in that last year. He went from 39% 3-point shooting in each of the last 2 years, 39 and 40, to 45% a career year. He did it while taking 6 a game. He was really one of the most positively impactful players in the NBA last year, taking 6 of his 8 shots from threes, making 45% of them. Is that, did he get hot? Is that replicable? The 65.2 effective field goal percentage is a remarkable number. His previous high was 61. He played 28 minutes, so he didn't reduce his minutes. He actually increased his shot attempts from the year prior. His assists were down a tiny bit. His rebounds were down a tiny bit. His steals were down a tiny bit, but nothing noticeable. And if you actually go look at Joe at per 36 minutes, then his rebounding is exactly the same. His assist rate was down a tiny bit, but everything else is about the same. But can Joe do that again? 45% from 3, 65% effective field goal percentage. Donovan Mitchell, I think there's every reason to believe he can get better. But again, career year, effective field goal percentage, 52%. Previous high was the year prior at 51. 26 points a game. Career high the year before was 24. 6 free throws. Career high was 4.7. His rebounds were right at his career high. His assists were up 1. Career year across the board, his three-point shooting went from 36.6 to 38.6. He, I think it's reasonable to expect, should get better. Rudy Gobert last year, 67.5 field goal percentage, career high, number 1 in the NBA. His 68% two-point shooting was the best of anyone in the league, down a little bit from his year prior. He actually shot 69% the year prior, 68 this year. His free throw shooting wasn't actually better. He's actually declined in each of the last 4 seasons at the line. His rebounding was the exact same. His blocks went up. Again, I don't think there's any reason to expect Donovan or Rudy to slide at all here. Bojan Bogdanovic, which was an up and down year last year, is not going to probably fit into this in the same way. But when you dig in, it was still pretty solid. Effective field goal percentage at 53.6, which was down a little bit from his career and down a little bit from last year at 54.8. So he's probably the one who took 2 less shots as Mike increased his game, as Joe was active. Bojan's the one who kind of got lost in the shuffle. We saw that when Bojan got out there against it, and when the guys were hurt late in the year and Bojan played incredibly well, he suddenly, had the ball in his hands more, had more opportunities, and was amazing. And our final career year, to some extent, is Jordan Clarkson. But surprisingly, the only thing in the Jordan Clarkson career year is really his points and his shot attempts at 18 points and 16 shot attempts. A remarkable increase in shot attempts. In virtually the same amount of time, he took 3 more shots a game than he took in his 42 games with Utah the year before. He took 9 threes a game instead of 6. He actually didn't make – his effective field goal percentage was 52.2, which was the low he's had since his last time he was that low. And his effective field goal percentage was his year in 2017-18 when he gets traded from the Lakers and the Cleveland Cavaliers. So Jordan actually, other than award-winning and free throw shooting, and his rebounds were up nicely from 2.8 to 4, and his assists were up, I know it's hard to believe, from 1.6 to 2.5 with the Jazz. He actually doesn't have a career year. So when I look at this, I'm talking really, and then this gets really age specific. I'm talking about Mike Conley in his 14th year in the league. I'm talking about Joe Ingles in his 8th year in the league. And whether or not those 2 particular guys who had massively important, unbelievable career years last year and were that great can do that again. And to me, that's a huge part of this story for the Jazz. I think it's fair to think Bojan probably should have a same kind of year, even though he's on the older end of the age scale, but just because he kind of got minimized with his possessions. Now, Rudy Gay is another high possession user. He's going to use many more possessions than George Niang. So, how does that fit and what does that do? And, it's hard to tell, if he suddenly has a career year, it really says something about the way Utah runs their system, what Quinn does as a team, and how it all works in that. So those are my biggest concern for this season. It really comes down to Mike Conley and Joe Ingles more than anyone else. They were both so good last year. They're both over the kind of age barrier of where you expect an upward trajectory of play. Mike turns October 11th. Mike will turn 34 years old. So right as we're in the middle of preseason, it's not expected at 34 years old that you're going to keep getting better. And Joe turns it on October 2nd. So both of those guys crest over 34 years old. Both those guys coming off incredible seasons. Now, Joe's, become particular about what he eats, and so is Mike, and how they take care of themselves, and the system is great for them. So maybe, you get another year or two out of those two guys at their peak like we've seen. All right, Tony Jones is coming up on the show. We love it with Tony. It's a lot of fun. We'll dig more into the Jazz. First day we did Ben Simmons and the Lakers. Today we'll delve a little bit more into Utah and things of that sort. We'll also talk about the rest of the West and Denver and Michael Porter Jr. and some of those kind of players and all of that coming up. Thanks very much for making Locked On Jazz your first listen of the day. I appreciate it so much. And when it's time for you to done with me and Tony, your second listen of the day, Locked On Fantasy Basketball with Josh Lloyd. He's been doing a great season preview, running through with all of our Locked On experts to hear about his team. So make sure when you're done with this, you go grab for your second listen of the day, Locked On Fantasy Basketball. Today's show is brought to you by my good friends over at Murdoch. Boy, Blake Murdoch's doing something truly amazing. As you know, there's an incredible car shortage out there. Most car dealerships are adding on top of MSRP. The Murdochs are not going to do it. Blake says, we are not going to gouge people in this unique time right now. He basically said to me, I'm not going to church and looking at people who I went and took advantage of. So here, they have the same shortage of cars as everyone else. Let me tell you what's in. The Palisades, which have been incredibly hard to get in. There will be a silver one in on October 24th and a white one in on October 25th. So that's about a month from now. Here is what's in stock today. A 2022 Tucson Limited Red. The Santa Fe Calligraphy Black is in today. There'll be one also in later this week. A SEL Premium Gray will come in on the 24th for the Santa Fe. So you can jump on that. We own two of those Santa Fe's, just absolutely amazing. The 2022 Kona Silver is in. 14 more coming in between now and October 26th. So get on that wait list and get in on those Konas and the Elantras. I'm driving the Sonata right now. I just finished with the Elantras. They're incredible. The Sonatas, there aren't any in stock. There's 14 in production coming within a month. The 22 Elantra Limited Blue is available today. Another silver one comes in tomorrow, and a blue one comes in the day after. So there's a few cars in stock. They will not gouge you and take you above MSRP. Go check it out at Murdoch Hyundai, located in located in Logan, in Linden, and in Murray. If you're heading over there, feel free to email me first at dlock09@gmail.com, and we will take care of you, get you set up with your VIP meeting. If you got one device that's let you catch the games live, another lets you stream your favorite shows, another for watching highlights on your phone, well, guess what? It's time to get rid of all of that. It's called DirecTV Stream, and it brings your live TV on-demand favorites together like never before. You can watch your favorite sports, movies, and shows all in one place. That means no juggling remotes, no need to buy another device ever again, and the best part, there's no annual contract. So get rid of the clutter and the confusion and get your TV together with DirecTV Stream. You can learn more at directtv.com. That's directtv.com. Compatible device required. Contents vary by package, but you can get it all now with DirecTV Stream. When you last tuned in to TJ and Locke, the world had exploded. The Lakers were going to be terrible. There were 5 teams that could be all part for the play-in game or in the NBA, and Tony thought I'd lost my mind. We're revisiting that. So I said that I thought there were like 5 teams who I thought could be either in the play-in game, i.e. 7th, and I equally think they could win the West. So Dallas. I love Dallas. Luke is going to be the most improved player in the Western Conference this year to last year, is my guess, or last year to this year is my guess. Kristaps can't be worse than he was last year, Tony. They've got nice pieces. The Josh Richardson, Seth Curry thing was a mess. They actually didn't even they got rid of him without losing a first-round draft pick. I kind of think that Luka could carry them to win the West. At the same time, considering their new head coach doesn't have the greatest track record of winning, I think they could be and frankly be good and still be the 7th best team. What's your thought on that?
So I think Luka and Jason Kidd are going to be better than people think with each other, because Jason Kidd loves tough guys, and Luka's a tough kid, and Luka's a tough-minded kid, and I don't think that there's going to be anybody that can be harder on Luka than Luka is on himself. So I think the dynamic between Luka and Jason Kidd is going to be just fine. Now, the dynamic between Jason Kidd and Kristaps Porzingis, I might give that over-under until like January, until one of them want to kill each other, because I'm not sure how tough Kristaps is, and I could just see him, just frustrating the heck out of Jason, especially, when teams start, pick and rolling him to death, or especially when, you need him to go and get a tough rebound, and he doesn't get that tough rebound, or he does, one of his Kristaps things, like he disappears for quarters at a time. And it'll be really interesting to see if Jason has the patience now to coach Kristaps up, because I think he needs to be coached up to a certain degree. And I think he's a guy that needs, consistent, a consistent pat on the back, like, hey, let's go. And it'll be interesting to see if Jason Kidd is that guy that's going to coach his guy up. So it's going to be interesting to see that. I'm interested to see that.
If Luka Doncic is not the most improved player in the Western Conference, the player that's going to improve the most, that's going to have the largest impact, to me, is Michael Porter Jr. Michael Porter Jr. in the last 22 games of the season last year, when Jamal Murray was hurt, averaged like 28 points a game, shot like 50, I'm making this up, but I'm close, shot like 55% the floor, 40 some odd percent from three. And I don't think Denver skips a beat offensively without Jamal Murray this year, because Michael Porter Jr. picks up those possessions and is actually more efficient. And they have two of the top 10 most efficient offensive players with him and Jokic. Defensively, I'm not sure where they are. I actually don't think there's much of a chance that they finish seventh. I do think there's a chance they win the West if Jamal Murray comes back and contributes.
I agree with you there. I think Denver is a team that nobody's talking about, that people should be talking about. I think that they're good enough to last the entire season without Jamal Murray, and I would put the Clippers in that realm as well without Kawhi Leonard. But at the same time, Jamal Murray could come back and take this team to another level. So, it'll be interesting with the top three teams that I'm anticipating, which is, the Lakers, the Jazz, and the Suns. I'll be interested to see what the seeding is there, to see if, one of those teams can try to avoid. You're just not going to avoid Denver, Dallas, and the Clippers in the second round. You're going to see one of those teams, or the Golden State Warriors. You're definitely going to see one of those teams. But it'll be interesting to see, what Denver is by the end of the season, how healthy Jamal Murray is by the end of the season, and what leap Michael Porter Jr. makes. I mean, I think he has to get better on the ball. I think he has to get better ball in hand. Obviously, he's still got to continue to evolve defensively. I think one of the most underrated parts of his game is his rebounding. I think he's an elite rebounder, on both ends of the floor. And it'll be interesting to see if he becomes more of a playmaker for his teammates. But, obviously he can shoot the heck out of the basketball, and he's an offensive weapon, from all three levels with his scoring. He's a guy that has a chance to be an all-star this year.
All right. I was talking to a coach in the league about this, and I was talking about Michael Porter Jr. And so in the final 17 games of the season, these are the actual numbers. Michael Porter Jr. shot 56% from the floor, 49% from three, and scored 24 a game. So 56, 49. That's really stupid. The coach then said to me, why do you think those numbers are more important than the 10 playoff games where he was still good? He shot 47-39, so 47-40, but he only scored 17 points a game. He only got 13 shots off when there was a scouting report against him. Which do you think is actually, and let's be perfectly clear, that playoff run I just gave you is still pretty outstanding. 47% from the floor, 40% from three in 10 playoff games against good teams. But which do you think is a better indicator of who Michael Porter Jr. is as a player?
Well, they're both better, and they're both indicators. I mean, because for the simple reason that playoff basketball is different than regular season basketball. And, it's a different game in the playoffs. And this is why I said that, Michael Porter Jr. has to become better off the dribble. He has to become better. He has to become a better ball in hand player. because when you do take away those tendencies, or if you take away Stephen Curry's tendency, well, guess what? It doesn't matter because he's just going to be like, okay, I'm going to back you up and I'm going to come at you and I'm going to break you down and I'm going to get to where I want to go. The elite guys become, scout proof. It just becomes whether you make or miss. So if Michael Porter Jr.'s next step in his evolution offensively is become better off the dribble and become a guy that can beat people off the dribble. And that'll negate a lot of the scout to where, okay, we're going to play topside with him. We're not going to let him catch the ball in this spot. We're going to make him catch the ball from 22 feet rather than 20 feet. We're going to crowd his space and we're going to contest, but we're not going to foul him. And then we're going to put a body on him wherever he goes, wherever screen that he comes through. When he comes off the pin down, we're going to put a body on him. We're going to be physical with him because that's what they did with him in the playoffs. And it muted him a little bit. Like you said, his numbers were still good. He was still 17 points a game. His shooting splits were still good. But he wasn't the really, really good guy that he was in the regular season. So, for me, I think he has to get to a point where it doesn't matter if the scout against you is great or not. He can go out and get his regardless.
Warriors last year did not make the playoffs, basically. They were 39-33. They did not make the playoffs. Steph Curry played 63 games. Draymond Green played 63 games. So they played 90% of the games. That's about what you can expect this year. Steph Curry was unbelievable last year. You can't really expect him to be better. They've added 2 rookies to their roster. Rookies never make you better unless they're named Donovan Mitchell. But really, there's very little chance Kuminga and Moody help them win games next year. That's not what rookies do. Why do people think the Warriors are like a title contender?
Well, I think, this is a lot of, the fan base saying, okay, Klay Thompson is going to come back and he's going to be Klay Thompson. Number one, he's probably going to come back, around Christmas. So that's already 30 games into the season. But secondly, I think a lot of people say, okay, well, Kevin Durant came back from the Achilles and he was Kevin Durant immediately, right away. So, a lot of the optimism is, what Klay Thompson can come back as. Does he come back as 50% of Klay Thompson, the Klay Thompson that we saw when he left? Does he come back as 80 or 90%? And if he does, then obviously Golden State's a much better team. If I'm a Golden State fan, my source of optimism will lie in this. Steph maintains his level. Steph maintains his level. James Wiseman makes a jump. He figures it out to a degree. He makes a jump from his rookie to his second year. Jordan Poole, I think, has a chance to be, a 6 man of the year contender. I mean, I think he's a guy that I think that has a chance to be really good. Otto Porter Jr. stays healthy, and if he stays healthy, he's a really, really good basketball player. Andre Iguodala comes in, even though he's not, the Iggy of the past. He offers a lot of stability, and within the locker room and on the floor with Steph and Dre, and Draymond Green, he maintains his level defensively, even though he's not a great offensive player. So those would be my sources of optimism. And obviously Andrew Wiggins maintains his level because I think Andrew Wiggins was really good last year as well. So I think that there's a lot of things that have to go right for them to crack the top 4. I don't see, maybe they can crack number 4. I don't see them cracking the top 3. But I do think that they have a chance. There's a chance that they could be better.
I'm not sure I see it. All right. He's Tony Jones.
What do you see?
I think they'll be fine, but I don't see any jump from last year. I just don't. I can't imagine. The only jump I see from last year is Klay Thompson, but I actually think Draymond's declining a little bit. I think he's still great, but I just can't buy that Klay Thompson, 2 years off of one Achilles and one ACL and having not played in 2 years is going to vault them from an 8th or 9th team in the West to a home court advantage team. I don't see that.
Yeah, I tend to have them around 6 or 7.
Okay, so it moves them a little bit. Right. A lot of people have them a lot more. Over-under has them, I think over-under in the West has the Warriors as like 4th, right?
Right. I've seen people, think that the Warriors are going to be 2nd.
Yeah,
I just don't see that.
Yeah, I can't.
I think the top 3, I think the 3 teams I think the Jazz, the Lakers, and the Suns are just, I think all 3 of those teams are great teams. I think they're great basketball teams. And
all right. Well, then let's find out why on the Utah Jazz next and how they get better than they were a year ago with Tony Jones. Tony Jones is just fun NBA talk. It's just that simple. He's just fun NBA talk. When I'm talking to Tony Jones, I do need Sweat Block, though. Well, that's just a transition sentence, but I do get a little nervous. I got to hold it up. And Sweat Block is currently the #1 antiperspirant on Amazon. A bestseller for the last 10 years is now #1 in the Amazon antiperspirant category with over 13,000 reviews. What is Sweat Block? In the simplest form, Sweat Block is the dry shirt guarantee. If it doesn't keep you dry, you get your money back. Excessive sweating, big events, date night. High school kid who have this and also they're super embarrassed. Here's what you do. You shower at night. You're done. You put on your Sweat Block before you go to bed, and you're dry for the rest of the week. It's stronger and more effective than most clinical antiperspirants. You simply apply it at night before you go to bed. The next morning, you wake up, wash, and go about your day without worrying, without sweat. Guaranteed. For those of you who have excessive sweating or those people who need those for the big event, it seems too good to be true. It is true. No more pitting out. If you or someone you love is dealing with this, check out sweatblock.com, 20% off with the promo code Locked On. That's 20% off with the promo code Locked On. It can be anything from a big event to an excessive sweating issue or just a date night, and you want to make sure that you're not dealing with it. It works up to 7 days per use, and you get the dry shirt guarantee. It's Sweat Block. It's #1 in the Amazon antiperspirant category right now. Manufactured in the U.S., doctor created and doctor recommended. Go to sweatblock.com. Use the promo code Locked On to get 20% off. Today's show is also brought to you by the fantasy experts at Sleeper, who realized that fantasy basketball was broken. The games were being won and lost based on whose players had more scheduled games that week. It made no sense, required very little strategy. So in 2020, Sleeper released a brand new way of playing fantasy basketball. It's a game called Game Pick. It's only available on Sleeper. In Game Pick, owners pick a single game per week for each starter to count towards their total score, ensuring an even number of games played amongst opponents. The days of losing because your opponent played more games is over. The days of giving up halfway through the season because of the busy work, all over. The day of getting screwed by player management, over. So find your matchup, home versus away, defensive rating, pace of play. Figure out what it is that's going to make the difference for you and choose the right one. It's Game Picks. It has you covered. Sleeper cracked the fantasy basketball code. If you play fantasy football, if you prefer building out a weekly strategy versus daily busy work, you're going to love Game Picks. Download the Sleeper app. Start a league with your friends today. You will not be disappointed. That's the Sleeper app, and start a league getting ready today. It's funny. I was at the gym yesterday before I get back to Tony. Tony always likes to talk about the gym. I should ask Tony about this. I was at the gym yesterday. At the end of the workout, everyone's like diving for the Theraguns. They are absolutely fantastic. The Theragun is a handheld percussive therapy device that releases your deepest muscle tensions using scientifically calibrated combo of depth, power, speed, and it's quiet as an electric toothbrush. The Gen 4 Theragun doesn't just feel good. It's a source of releasing tension. Using the Theragun signature percussive therapy goes 60% deeper than any other vibration. That's probably why everybody was diving for them. There were like 8 people there, and there were only 2 devices, and everyone was all over it. The OLD screen and design make you feel like you're holding something from the future. Go check it out. Try Theragun for 30 days, starting at only $199. Go to therabody.com/lockedon right now to get your Gen 4 Theragun. That's therabody.com/lockedon. The therabody.com/lockedon. Thanks very much for making Locked On Jazz your first podcast listen of the day. For your second podcast listen of the day, when you're done with myself and Tony Jones, there's Locked On Today. Locked On Today is a great 15-minute capsule of all the things you need to know. They delve into the 3 biggest stories, plus give you all the other news and notes, and you're completely up to date on the sports world as you know it. Locked On Today every day. on the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks for making Locked On Jazz your first listen with Tony Jones. I'm David Locke, and I need to know, I got asked the other day from a very, very particular pointed man who said, why are the Utah Jazz better this year than they were last year? What's your answer, Tony?
Well, I think they're deeper. I think that Rudy Gay makes them a deeper team. I think Eric Pascal makes them a deeper team. I think that this part is unproven, but I think Doka as a Buki makes them a deeper team. And I think that there's some measure of cushion. The question I have with the Jazz is, will they be matchup proof when it matters? Because that's why they lost in the playoffs. They weren't matchup proof. They ran into a bad matchup, and that bad matchup beat them. And the teams that win championships, those are the teams that are matchup proof. Take the Lakers for 2 years when they went on their run 2 years ago. They ran into the Houston Rockets small ball. They said, oh, okay, you want to go small ball, you want to spread us out, we're going to put Anthony Davis at center. And you put Anthony Davis at center, the series was over. So the Lakers were matchup proof. And I think the last step for the Jazz, for them to make a deep playoff run, is to be matchup proof. And I think that, you have a guy in Rudy Gay who played over 200 minutes at center last year for the San Antonio Spurs. I think Eric Pascal, he broke into the league being a small ball center. So it'll be interesting to see if the Jazz figure out a way to be matchup proof. The question with them is,
can I jump in here for a second? I have one problem with this narrative that I've built too. Okay, like a little bit of a mea culpa here, right? Rudy Gay can play center, Eric Pascal. You know what the problem with all this is? You know what the problem with the Jazz playing small ball centers?
Can't guard on the perimeter.
Rudy Gobert's not on the floor. He's like our best player.
Right.
Like, it's all cute and it's all fun to talk about. But when it really gets down to it, tell me the moment in time where when the game's on the line and it's really, really important that somehow the Jazz are going to go without Rudy Gobert. It's just not going to happen.
Well, it's not going to happen. So what's the onus, right? The onus is, and let's take the Clippers series out, but the onus is Donovan Mitchell, you got to stay in front of your guy. Mike Conley, you got to stay in front of your guy. Joe Ingles, you got to stay in front of your guy. Bojan Bogdanovic, you got to stay in front of your guy. Royce O'Neal, you got to stay in front of your guy. Because if you guys don't stay in front of your guy, then guess what? Then Rudy Gobert's got to come and help you out. And then that's an easy pitch to the corner. And then Terrence Mann gets hot from three-point range and scores a cajillion points, or however many points he scored in Game 6. So, I mean, it's a team effort. And, we could talk about Rudy Gobert. We could talk about that until the day is blue. But it's got to be a team effort when you face a team that wants to spread you out and go 5 out. Yes, Rudy Gobert's got to do his part, but so do his teammates. You got to guard. You got to stay in front of people.
I've rewatched the second half of that Game 6. The narrative out there is that it's somehow on Rudy. That's comical.
Yeah, I did not think that was very unfair to Rudy.
I will also say, in defense of the other guys, Tony, when rewatching it, the injuries did really matter. There's the play where Paul George comes around on a left to right bend, and Donovan's trying to stay with him, and he just can't get there. He just right. There's some straight line drives. Joe Ingles has a bad closeout in the corner, and there's a transition where Joe tries to go get it and misses, and they go the other way. And there's a straight line drive on Bojan, and Jordan is guarding and reaches and gets burned, and Mike and Donovan get burned. But it does feel like the injuries mattered a little bit there. They really but to your point, you know what? It doesn't matter. You can't guard your yard. It doesn't matter. If teams can literally just say, I'm driving straight downhill on you, I'm going to the rack, and if your big guy's not there, you can't guard me, so it doesn't matter, then it's a problem.
So the two biggest questions that I have for the Jazz are, will they prove to be matchup proof when it matters, and will they be healthy when it matters? Because, like you said, I think the injuries did matter. I think that people look at Donovan Mitchell and they say, "Oh, well, he averaged 38 points. He averaged this, he averaged that. So how hurt can he be?" The bottom line was he couldn't, by the time that we got to game 4, game 5, and game 6, he couldn't move defensively. Couldn't move offensively either. The only reason that he was scoring as much was because he's such an elite shooter that he was just making a bunch of threes. People didn't realize that part. He wasn't really exploding and getting to the rim. And offensively, even when he did get to the rim, he wasn't able to play make for others because he couldn't explode past anybody. So, yeah, Donovan Mitchell's injury, it mattered. It mattered a lot in the other parts of the game that didn't involve putting the ball through the basket. Obviously, Mike Conley's injury mattered. It changed, much of the entire spectrum for the Jazz. So, if the Jazz are going to do what their goal is or what their goal is going to be this year, they have to be healthy enough to do it. So, I think that's a big question. And the second, and one of the other big questions is, how does Hassan Whiteside fit into the equation? And what Hassan Whiteside are you going to get? If he's engaged, then, this is a good signing. But if he's not engaged, it can go left it can go awry pretty quickly.
It's interesting. Hassan Whiteside is the player who I actually think, if you want to know when I got asked that question by someone like, what makes the Jazz better? My answer was, you know what? When Faves was on the floor, they were the 29th percentile defensively last year. So when Rudy was off the floor last year, they were just horrendous defensively. If they can be league average defensively, because Hassan Whiteside is so big, and he's just a lot bigger than Faves, then that's where they'll be noticeably better. They'll not only be the best defensive team in the league, they'll be the best defensive team in the league by a large margin. So to me, that's actually where they would get better. That Hassan Whiteside can roll to the basket and play above the rim, and that he actually is just a significant upgrade on Faves. That might be a pie in the sky idea, but that's the spot where I see the Jazz get better. I don't buy summer league, so Doke's got to prove it to me in NBA action instead of against a bunch of amateur guards.
Very, very fair. So where I think the Jazz get better, I think it's Rudy Gay. I think Rudy Gay is, I think adding him to what they already have in the mix, I think it makes him significantly better because he's a guy that, in his career, he's played 3 to 4 to 5. He's another guy that can play with the ball in his hands. He's become steadily a better shooter as the season is going on. You look at his defensive metrics last year; he was really good defensively for the Spurs. He's experienced playing in this kind of system. He's obviously really close with Mike Conley. So, I mean, there's the acclimation to the roster. I don't think is and he's an all around. He's become an all around good guy as his career is going on, and he's one of those guys. I call it like the Vince Carter syndrome, where you have a guy that's been a ball in hand guy for most of his career, but gracefully figured out how to be a really good role player. And I think Rudy Gay is going to be a really good role player for the Jazz.
I was so impressed by Rudy Gay in our press conference with him. Just his basketball intelligence. I'm referring to him as a basketball chameleon. That I think he really understands how to change his game to match what his team needs. You buy that?
I do buy that. I mean, I think he's a different player than Joe Johnson, but I think he can have a Joe Johnson type of impact on this roster. I think he's a guy that, you're going to look up in the playoff game and, somehow, some team's going to guard Mike and Donovan really well. And, Bojan's going to, go 30% in a game. And they're going to win that playoff game because Rudy Gay was like, okay, this is where I can step in and score 25 points. And I think that he's that kind of guy that, you know, he could come out and be a scorer one night. He could come out, be a facilitator another night. He could come out, be a defender another night. I think he's made all of his money. He doesn't care about touches. He doesn't care about shots. He just wants to give this roster whatever it needs to aid it in winning on the highest level. So I just really think that you know, getting Rudy Gay for this roster is big. Now, the caveat is this is on paper. I thought the same thing with Jeff Green and Ed Davis, and that didn't work out. So you, at the end of the day, you got to see it work out. But, you know, just at least on paper, just from my analysis of looking at knowing what Rudy Gay has been for his career and what he can be as a fit for this roster, I think it's a huge addition for them.
All right, Tony Jones is with us tomorrow on the show. We'll address the very big issue that both of us are talking around that we're not really willing to address, that we willingly addressed about the Lakers and the Warriors and other teams, about the Jazz. We'll do that tomorrow. Thanks very much for tuning into Locked On Jazz today for your first podcast listen. As I suggested, why don't you try out Locked On today, now, as your next listen. On your smart device, just tell it to play. Podcast Locked On Today. Have a wonderful day. He's Tony Jones of The Athletic. You can read him there. You can follow him on Twitter at I'm really smart about hoops. No, what is it again? Your Twitter account?
T Jones on the NBA.
Oh, yeah. It's not I'm just really smart on hoops. It's T Jones on the NBA. Back with Tony for our final day tomorrow.